I was in Hartford for 3 weeks helping my sister recover from her hip surgery when my son-in-law sold my barn to back a property development deal. When I pulled into the driveway on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, there was a chrome realtor's lockbox hanging where my father's hand-painted sign used to be, and a row of orange surveyor's flags pushed into the ground along the property line like little fires. My daughter texted while I was still sitting in the truck with the engine running. "Dad, before you react, just know we made the best decision we could with the time we had. You can build anywhere." I stared at that message for a long time. Long enough for the engine to cool and the wood thrush in the back tree line to go through its whole song twice. Then I walked up to the barn door and found the padlock. I turned around and smiled at nobody. My daughter called 5 minutes later. She asked what was funny. I said quietly, "The deed your husband signed has something in it he didn't read," and that's when the yelling started. My name doesn't matter to this story. What matters is that I am 63 years old. I live on 11 acres outside Hartwell, Tennessee, in a white farmhouse my father built in 1964, and I have worked with my hands every day of my adult life. The barn is 40 by 60 feet, board and batten, tin roof I replaced myself 12 years ago. My grandfather kept cattle in it. My father converted it into a workshop in 1971 and painted a sign for the door, Woodworks. With a 2-inch brush he kept wrapped in wax paper between uses. I stood in the doorway when he painted it. I was 9. I had sawdust on my shoes from following him around all morning. My father was a Finnish carpenter, the way some men are musicians. He didn't just cut wood, he listened to it. He taught me that a good piece of timber will tell you what it wants to be if you slow down and pay attention. He taught me to read grain, the way other men read weather. By the time I was 16, I was doing finish work on houses alongside him. By the time I was 25, I had my own clients. For 38 years, I ran a custom woodworking business out of that barn. Furniture, cabinetry, architectural millwork, restoration pieces for old houses that deserved to be saved. I was never famous. I was never trying to be. I had a reputation in 3 counties and a waiting list 6 months long most of the year, and that was enough. That was more than enough. When my father died, he left me the land in a deed he'd had drawn up carefully. He'd been burned by a property dispute with a neighbor in the 80s, and after that he never signed anything without reading it twice and having his attorney read it once. He left me the land, the house, the barn, and his tools. The tools are not replaceable, not because of money, though some of them are worth real money. A full set of antique Stanley bench planes, a set of Japanese chisels still in their original lacquered box, a marking gauge he bought in 1967 at a hardware store in Knoxville that closed 20 years ago. They are not replaceable because of what they remember. Every nick and worn edge is a decade of work. Every handle is shaped slightly to the grip of his hand. His mallet he carved himself from a piece of black walnut that came off a tree that fell in the ice storm of 1978. He spent 3 weekends shaping it. He stamped our family name into the head with a set of letter punches and then rubbed linseed oil into the wood until it was almost black. That mallet has driven more joinery than I could count. When I inherited it, I hung it on a peg I made specifically for it, in the same spot on the wall where he always kept it. My wife used to sit in the doorway of the barn on summer evenings. She'd bring 2 glasses of iced tea out and set one on the corner of my bench without saying anything, and then she'd sit in the old ladder-back chair, kept there for no other purpose. She'd read or just watch, and we'd talk sometimes, and sometimes we wouldn't, and those were some of the best hours of my life. She died 5 years ago. The chair is still in the barn. I never moved it. My daughter is our only child. She married her husband 11 years ago. I walked her down the aisle on a June afternoon and felt like a man who'd done one thing completely right, and I still believe that about my daughter, that she is a fundamentally good person who sometimes loves unwisely. Her husband is ambitious. That is the word I used for years because it was the truest word I could say out loud at the dinner table. He'd had 4 businesses in 11 years. 1 closed. 1 was acquired for almost nothing. 1 was still in development, which I understood to mean it existed mainly on a slide deck. Now he was in real estate, buying distressed properties, renovating fast, selling faster, always one deal away from the thing that would finally make him solvent. I was useful to them. I know that now in a way I didn't fully see then. I watched the grandkids when they traveled. I fixed what broke at their house. I lent money 3 different times, and I won't say more about that. I was the kind of father who answers the phone on the second ring and doesn't ask for much in return, and they knew it. And some quiet part of me knew they knew it. And for a long time, that was just the arrangement. When my sister called about the surgery, I didn't hesitate. She lives alone, 3 hours north, and there was nobody else. I packed a duffel bag on a Sunday morning, told my daughter I'd call every couple of days, kissed my grandkids, and drove north. My son-in-law was in the kitchen when I left. He waved from the doorway, friendly, easy, the wave of a man who is already thinking about something else. I was gone 22 days. When I turned back into my driveway, I saw the lockbox. I saw the surveyor's flags. I saw the business card under my windshield wiper, Pinnacle Profity Srilsus, Nashville, Tennessee, and I got my daughter's text. You can build anywhere. I have thought about those 4 words more than I care to admit. There is a particular kind of dismissal that wears the shape of practicality. It says, your history is inconvenient to my plans, so I'm reclassifying it as sentiment. It says, the things that make you are not the things that count. It says, underneath everything, you are more useful to me than you are to yourself. My daughter had learned that phrase from her husband. I knew it, because she had never once, in 63 years, looked at that barn and thought replaceable. I called her first. She'd rehearsed. I could tell from the smoothness of her voice, the way she moved through her sentences, like she'd walked them already in her head. Great opportunity, fair market value, deadline. We handled everything. You don't have to worry. I didn't authorize a sale, I said. There's paperwork. It's all legal. I asked her to put her husband on. He took the phone like a man doing me a favor. He told me the offer was fair market. He told me the family property wasn't generating anything anymore. He told me retirement meant slowing down. He told me, and I will remember the exact phrasing until I die, that I could always set up a little workshop at their place, that they had the extra garage, that I could build anywhere. I thanked him for nothing and hung up. I am not a lawyer. What I am is a man whose father taught him to read the terms of things. I called my estate attorney, who referred me to a woman named Joyce. She had an office in Knoxville and a voice that arrived at the point without detours. Send me the deed and anything your son-in-law sent you, she said. 2 days before I'd left for Hartford, my son-in-law had emailed me a summary of what he called some options he was exploring for the property. I'd skimmed it, noted the word exploring, and moved on. I sent it to Joyce along with a photograph of my father's deed, which I keep in a manila envelope in the top drawer of my bedroom dresser, along with my wife's death certificate and our marriage license. Joyce called me the next morning. She spoke carefully, the way people speak when they want to make sure you understand the first time. Your father included a family consent covenant in the deed when he transferred the property to you, she said. It's recorded. It says the property cannot be conveyed, sold, transferred, mortgaged, or otherwise alienated without the written consent of the current owner and a majority of the surviving heirs named in his will. That includes your sister. I sat down. My son-in-law didn't have that consent, I said. He didn't have yours or your sister's. He used a power of attorney your daughter executed, but I need you to bring me that document because a general financial POA is typically not sufficient for real property transfer. It requires specific language. I found the document in an email thread I'd ignored 3 months earlier, buried under the subject line, estate planning stuff. Just FYI. My daughter had signed a general power of attorney her husband had drafted. It was broad, full of confident language. Joyce read it in her office in 20 minutes. Insufficient, she said, tapping the page. A general financial power of attorney grants authority over financial decisions. A real property transfer requires a durable POA with explicit conveyance language. This doesn't have it. The sale, on this basis alone, is defective. Then she showed me the attachment. The purchase agreement my son-in-law had submitted to the developer, a Nashville firm planning a 12-lot subdivision, included a supplementary letter. The letter was typed on a blank letterhead. It described me as the property owner and explained that due to my declining cognitive function and difficulty managing complex decisions, my family had stepped in to exercise oversight in my best interest. I read the letter twice. I don't know how to describe what it feels like to read yourself characterized as incompetent by your own family. It is not simply anger, it is the particular, disorienting loneliness of having someone take the shape of who you are and fill it with something shameful in order to make their story work. They didn't just sell my property. They built an argument for why I was too diminished to object. He told them I couldn't manage my own affairs, I said. My voice was even. That surprised me. He told them you were incapable of informed refusal, Joyce said, which serves two purposes. It explains why your signature wasn't obtained, and it preempts any challenge you might raise. She looked at me across her desk. That letter is false. That makes it something more serious than a defective contract. We filed to void the purchase agreement. Joyce sent notice directly to Pinnacle Property Solutions and their attorneys, outlining the recorded covenant, the insufficiency of the power of attorney, and the fraudulent nature of the capacity letter. She notified the county recorder. She sent a copy to my son-in-law's attorney. By the following afternoon, Pinnacle had paused the project. They'd had a title search done. It should have been done before, and the covenant showed up immediately. Their attorneys, Joyce told me, were unhappy in a way that was going to have consequences for my son-in-law regardless of what I did next. My daughter called 16 times in 3 days. I listened to all 16 voicemails in order in one sitting, the way you read a document you'd rather put down. The first few were explanatory, then frustrated, then something that sounded like sorrow but carried the specific quality of sorrow that is really fear of what's coming. I let it ring. My son-in-law sent texts. The first said the injunction was affecting his relationship with his investors. The second said I was hurting my own grandchildren. The third said he could still make this work if I'd just sign a revised agreement, that I could keep using the barn for my lifetime, that it was a generous offer. What he was describing was a life estate, a legal arrangement that would give me use of what I already owned, offered back to me by the man who'd tried to take it. On the 4th day, they came to the house. My daughter walked in like she'd never stopped having a key, because she never had stopped having a key. My son-in-law stood in the kitchen doorway, with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the floor in the careful way of a man deciding which argument to try first. "You look exhausted," my daughter said. "I've been sleeping all right," I said. She sat at the kitchen table, the table where I'd helped her with geometry, where her mother and I had eaten 30 years of Sunday dinners, where her mother's handwriting was still on the bottom of one of the chairs in pencil from when she'd written a grocery list one morning and just used what was closest. My daughter sat at that table and folded her hands and said they'd had a plan to explain everything after the deal closed, when the timing was better. "Better for whom?" I said. She looked at her husband. He stepped forward, voice smoother now, the pitch meeting voice. He said the developer's offer was excellent. He said the land wasn't doing anything productive. He said I was retired. He said there were warehouse units available on Route 9. He'd already looked into it. Clean spaces, reasonable rent. I could build anywhere. There it was again. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said slowly, "Your daughter turned 4 last spring." He blinked. "What?" "For her birthday, I started building a blanket chest. Quarter-sawn white oak, hand-cut dovetails, a carved panel on the front with her initial. It's in your garage right now, still in pieces, because I haven't had the chance to finish it." I set my coffee cup down. "Tell me which warehouse on Route 9 is going to be the same as the bench where I measured that oak against the light that comes in the west window every afternoon. Tell me which storage unit smells like the sawdust my father swept up for 40 years. My son-in-law didn't answer. "You can build anywhere," my daughter said. Soft now, like she was pleading with me to believe it. "Stop saying that," I said. "Your grandfather painted that sign when I was 9 years old. Your mother sat in that barn on summer evenings for 30 years. Those are not equivalent to anywhere." The kitchen was quiet in a way kitchens get when the thing nobody wanted to say has finally been said. My son-in-law asked about compromise. He said that word the way he says everything, like the terms are already set, and I'm just being walked to the conclusion. He said if I agreed to a modified transaction, he could negotiate a provision that let me stay in the barn. He said he was trying to be fair. He's describing a life estate, Joyce had told me the day before, which your deed already functionally provides for under the covenant. He's offering you a legal instrument in exchange for releasing a legal instrument that's stronger. I told my son-in-law I would think about it. The day before the hearing, I drove to the storage facility where the barn's contents had been moved by a crew my son-in-law had hired and dispatched 2 days before I came home, which means he'd scheduled them before I even left Hartford, which means the deal was already being worked before my sister was even out of surgery. Unit 34, roll-up door, fluorescent lights, cold air that smelled like cardboard and nothing. My furniture was wrapped in moving blankets, tagged with numbers I didn't recognize. My lumber was stacked the right way, strips of cardboard between the boards, and that careful attention to detail that someone had known to do it correctly made it worse somehow, not better. My client's headboard was under a canvas in the corner, half finished, the surface still rough where I hadn't yet taken the final passes with the scraper. My father's mallet was on a shelf near the back, wrapped in a piece of soft cloth I didn't recognize. Someone had taken care with it. I picked it up. The walnut was warm in my hand even in the cold of the unit. The family names stamped in the head, 50 years worn, still clear. I stood there a long time. My body has gotten quieter as I've aged. When I was younger, grief moved fast, came out hot. Now it comes the other way, slow and heavy like a tide rather than a wave. I felt it standing in that storage unit, holding the mallet, understanding that someone had made a decision about what my life was worth without once asking what my life meant. I called my daughter from the parking lot. "You had them move my father's mallet," I said. "He wanted to protect the tools," she said. My phone was on the entire time I was in Hartford. She didn't answer that. "I want you to tell me something honestly," I said. "Not the deal, not the timeline. Just tell me, did you know about the capacity letter?" A long pause, longer than an innocent pause. "He told me it was a standard disclosure," she said. "He said it was just paperwork the developer needed." "It said I was losing my mind," I said. "That's not a standard disclosure. That's a story he told to make me easier to override." I heard her breath, sharp and quick, the breath of someone who has just understood something she'd been working not to understand. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "And on Sunday I want to see my grandkids, same as always. Bring them to the farm." The hearing was 6 weeks out. Joyce built the case in layers. The recorded covenant and its clear requirements, the insufficient power of attorney, the fraudulent capacity letter, and a timeline showing the movers were booked before I'd left for Hartford, which the judge noted quietly, suggested the transaction was not opportunistic but planned. My son-in-law's knee bounced through the entire proceeding. I watched him across the room and tried to find something to be angry at that wasn't also sad, and I couldn't fully separate them. When the judge voided the purchase agreement and confirmed the covenant's enforceability, my son-in-law put his face in his hands. My daughter stared straight ahead. She did not cry. She has her mother's particular composure, the kind that holds until you're somewhere private. In the hallway afterward, she found me before I reached the elevator. "I should have read what he handed me," she said. "Yes," I said. "I trusted him. I know." She looked at me with the particular look of a daughter who is trying to figure out whether she is still a daughter. "Are you done with us?" "No," I said, "but I'm done pretending this didn't happen if that's what you're asking." She nodded slowly. "Sunday," I said. "Bring the kids. I'll make breakfast." The developer settled fast once the ruling came through. My son-in-law lost the deal, the relationship with his investor, and 6 months of goodwill he'd spent a year building. Those losses were his to carry. The capacity letter was referred to the DA's office. These things move slowly, but they move. On the first morning, I cut the padlock on my own barn door, which I did myself with bolt cutters, which was the most satisfying physical act of that whole year. I stood inside for a while without turning the lights on. The smell came back immediately. Sawdust, old oil, the dry cold specific to that space. My wife's chair was in the corner where I'd always kept it. I walked to the peg and hung the mallet back in its place. Then I turned the lights on and went to work. My granddaughter's blanket chest, the quarter-sawn oak I'd been drying, undisturbed in the corner where I'd left it. My client's headboard still needing its final pass. 2 commissions that had waited patiently, the way good clients do when they understand they're dealing with someone who takes the work seriously. I picked up my father's card scraper. It has a slight curve in it he put there himself 40 years ago for clearing inside profiles. I pressed it to the headboard and made the first long pass. The shaving came off clean. The figure in the grain caught the morning light from the west window and went amber. There is something I know now that I didn't know as clearly before. The people who love you will sometimes begin to see you as infrastructure. Not deliberately most of the time. They come to rely on your steadiness, your availability, your willingness to absorb the hard parts of things without complaint. And somewhere in that reliance, without meaning to, they stop seeing the person and start seeing the function. When that happens, and it will tell you when it's happening, if you're honest about what you're feeling, it is not unkindness that drives them. It is just forgetting. The particular forgetting that happens when someone has always been there. But forgetting is not innocent. And there is a difference between being loved and being used, even when the same person is doing both. My father built that barn to last. He built the deed the same way, slowly, carefully, with provisions that looked ahead. He used to say that a well-cut joint doesn't need to announce itself. It holds because the geometry is right. The wood wants to stay together. You just have to cut it true. I think about that some mornings, when the light comes in at that low angle and makes the grain in a board look like something alive. I think about what holds and what doesn't, and why. The barn is still mine. The sign my father painted is still on the door. The mallet is on its peg. And I am not winding down.